On this episode of the Leverage Podcast, Nick sits down with one of the top serial entrepreneurs in the nation, Randy Garn. Randy has been named Entrepreneur of the Year by Ernst & Young and is on the top 40 under 40 list. He's exited over 5 companies and has one of the most impressive networks we've ever seen, from Eli Manning to the nation's top CEOs. Listen in to learn his entrepreneurial secrets on exiting companies, planning your business strategy, and mastering the art of customer acquisition through SMS.
Welcome back to the Leverage Podcast. I'm your host, Nick Sonnenberg, and today I have a very special guest, my good friend, Randy Garn. We met years ago. We're both part of Joe Polish's Genius Network group. And Randy is a really, really impressive entrepreneur. He's a serial entrepreneur. He has started companies like Scipio, which we'll go over, which is a text message-based marketing platform. He's currently launching a company called Parachute, which we'll get into. He's had multiple exits, New York Times bestselling author, Harvard Business School, MBA alum, 6 children, which to me is the most impressive, how you can have that many kids. I have 0 kids and I'm constantly busy. So I don't know how you manage running all these companies and having 6 kids, and just an all around awesome human being. You always have a smile on your face, really positive, and just a really awesome entrepreneur that I respect. So thank you very much for being on the show today.
Yeah, great to be here, man. It's I've always loved watching you and what you build. Love your energy and glad you invited me to be on today.
I don't even have 1% of your energy. I was just randomly looking at Facebook the other day, and next thing I know, you're running and dancing and jumping all over Kelly Ripa's show on national TV. So I was thinking to myself, man, if they would have picked me, that would have been my worst nightmare. I don't know what I would have done. You got a lot of energy. I respect it. So how did you get to where you're at? Let's just maybe start a little chronological here. You're this badass entrepreneur. You've launched all these companies, but what was it like growing up? Were you always entrepreneurial? Was it the typical, you sold baseball cards or sold newspapers at a young age or Cutco or whatever it is, and then that was the start? Like, how did you get to being a serial entrepreneur?
Out of necessity, to be honest with you, I grew up in Idaho, and just right by Jackson Hole. It was so beautiful. My dad was yeah, it's just amazing. But my dad was a high school football coach. They were both high school educators, and my mom taught English and debate, and so I think a lot of those things formed a lot of the things that I did. My dad was always pushing us. We'd always listen to Dennis Waitley and Zig Ziglar and Jim Rome in the car, and he always had those tapes on whenever we'd go out to the ranch. And I always said to myself, I'm going to be an entrepreneur. Even when I was young, I was like, I am never going to work for somebody else. And I don't know where that came from at an early age, when I started doing concrete and construction when I was 17 years old for a guy. And it was just miserable. Nick, it was the worst. And he said one thing to me. He said, Randy, you're going to make so much more money using your mouth than you do using your hands. And I always remember that because we were doing we were actually doing potato cellars in Idaho and basketball courts and foundations. And it was some serious hard work. But I always remember it was just miserable, and I didn't enjoy it. And listening to, Jim Rohn one day, and he's like, if you don't have your own goals, somebody else will use you for theirs. And that always stuck in my head. If you don't have your own goals, somebody else will use you for theirs. And I remember being 17, 18 years of age, and thinking about that. And I'm like, dude, I'm working $17 an hour for this guy, and I'm never going to get ahead. And so anyways, that was one of the things that really, really hit me.
And that's not even that bad that was in high school, $17 an hour.
Yeah.
Like that's good money. But so you never worked for someone else, basically, like after college, you went out and did entrepreneurship right out of the gate?
Yeah. So when I was in college, I actually lived in the Philippines for a few years in between college, and I learned a ton there as well. I was serving, we were teaching. I saw people in the most destitute of circumstances, and it really inspired me. Also, I think a lot of my success comes from learning how to treat people right. One of the books that my dad gave me when I was 18 before I left to the Philippines was How to Win Friends and Influence People. And that's actually a book that I give whenever I'm mentoring somebody or whenever I'm working with a company, whenever they're struggling. That's actually my number one read is How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. It's kind of been my Bible. And so I think one of the things that's made me most successful in my life is the way that I treat people and the way that I show up. And one of my mottos is do as much as you can for as many people as you can, as often as you can, without expecting anything in return. And you'll see what happens to your life.
No, that's great. I have to say that's been on my reading list for a very long time, and I'm embarrassed to say I haven't read that book. So I'm gonna bump that to the top of my 100-book queue.
Well, I'm gonna actually I'm gonna get you on that one, Nick, because you will love it because you're so good with people. Like even before this call, like Nick, you've already said, hey, here's like I think 4 people that you're gonna introduce me to. Like you're such a giver and you're so amazing. And that is there's some really good strategies in that book of how what I've coined the term velocity of relationship. How do you turn relationships into money and do that quickly? And you're just so good at that. I admire you for that.
I think that there's no one not about to keep, this isn't meant to go back and forth, just compliment each other. But if you just even Google Randy Garn and you look at your website, you have done not a bad job networking yourself. You know, every Facebook picture, every picture on your website. I mean, you really have networked your way to the top. I mean, not to name drop, but the top entrepreneurs in the world, you are not just taking pictures at a conference, but you are going fishing with them. Like you're actually friends with them because anyone could go and take a picture with one of these famous people and highlight that. But like you actually have built deep relationships and friendships with these people. So is that from some of the strategies or is that all coming from this book kind of at the start and that has influenced the way that you have networked and built relationships in your professional career? Like, how have you built such a robust network for yourself?
That's a good question. I actually think a lot of it probably has stemmed from that. I think a lot of it is that also I'd rather be the record label than the artist in a lot of cases and circumstances. You know, I don't need to be the guy on stage. I don't need to be the guy, but I am the guy behind the scenes, putting a lot of the deals together, you know, speeches together, business relationships together. So I'm really, really good on how to grab a relationship and say, you know what, you need to meet them and let's do that. I can think of 3 things that I did today that drove in revenue for me, and it was all through relationship based. And so I think a lot of it did come from that book, but I also think I've been a student of it. You know, amazing people that I totally love, like, and respect, like Joe Polish. I mean, he's been an amazing example of this throughout my life. I've been on the advisory board with Harvey McKay for the last 12 years, and he's been I've been a great student of his, and I've got a call with him next. Just an amazing human. People like we did all the coaching for, not only when I was young did I listen to Dennis Waitley and Jim Rome and Ken Blanchard has been a great friend of mine as well. We've done a book with him, but we started doing all the Nightingale Conant's coaching when the first company I started was Prosper. We started that when I was a junior in college and ran that for 14 years. And we, did amazing. We were probably one of the largest coaching companies in the nation during that time. We had, close to 1,000 employees and doing some tremendous revenue, but it was all around coaching and mentoring and relationship. And we did all of Nightingale Conant's coaching and training for 10 years. And so I think a lot of that's come just by really being in the business and being a student of personal development and business together. Because if you use personal development right on business strategy, then you can really excel.
Yeah, and I was with Jordan Harpinger, who, for those of you who don't know Jordan, he has the podcast, The Art of Charm. And he had a great quote he said to me. He said, the IRS you can go bankrupt and the IRS can take all of your assets, but they can't take your network. Yeah. And that really stuck with me. The value of your network is really one of the most priceless assets that you have. So throughout your experience with all of your deep relationships with some of these just rock star people, who kind of sticks out as the one that really just most impresses you of all the people that you've built these deep friendships with? Basically, you're going to piss off a lot of your friends right now and just
Well,
destroy your network right now secretly.
Yeah, I mean, somebody that I honestly really, really, really admire that I work closely with is a gentleman that isn't really part of our network too much, but I'm going to start bringing him into it. We just helped him do a book, Living on Purpose, which is Brandon Steiner from Steiner Sports. He's built this thing from scratch from when he was a young kid. He has Steiner Sports was a collectible company. And I mean, if I need anything whenever I'm in New York, Nick, literally I took the president of Entrepreneur Magazine. I took the guy from Car and Driver, Alan Taylor with Car and Driver. We took FantasySports.com CEO. We took, another guy that had sold this company for over $1 billion. We have, my partner we have a private fly fishing resort and a golf course that we own up in Jackson Hole that we own together. We took 8 guys to the Yankees game, and he's like, "No, Randy, no, you're like family to me. No, I'm going to take care of you." So we had front row seats. We had, legend seats. And so we go there, and I'm like, "Brandon, how much do I owe you for this?" He's like, "Bro, you've helped me out so much. Don't even worry about it." And then he'll just call randomly and just say, "Hey, I got Eli Manning in town. You want to fly in? You want to bring some guys to the event?" And then just last month, I'm a huge Mike Tyson fan. And so he sent me Mike Tyson Punch Out.
That's awesome.
Signed autograph, Randy, from one slugger to another, Mike Tyson. And I had Mike Tyson Punch Out, Nintendo with the Nintendo thing and 2 Mike Tyson gloves in a very solid frame thing. It's worth a ton. But he just did that. And I introduced him to some people. I've helped him with podcasts, but I can never catch up with the guy. Like, my whole motto in life too is like, I try to get even with people that treat me right.
Yeah. No,
don't waste your time on trying to get even with people that have done you wrong. It ain't going to get you anywhere. Just try to get even with people that you love and that have done great things for you. And it's been a really fun motto of his that I've learned from him.
That's great. So let's switch gears for a second. I am interested. You've had multiple companies, multiple exits. I mean, even just one exit is impressive, but you've done this multiple times. So you've clearly figured out some secret formula here with how to run a business, how to start business, how to exit. Could you just give everyone a quick background of what are all the different companies that you've started, and how you've been able to achieve so much success with these companies and have so many exits?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, the biggest part of it is a lot of people come up with great ideas, and entrepreneurs are like grasshoppers. They're great on takeoff, and you never know where they're going to land, right? And so for the last 6 years, I've known a gentleman that he's sold 5 companies for over $1 billion. Rob Ryan. He sold Ascend Communications for $24.3 billion, and he's been a partner of mine at a private resort that we have. But he always said, if you don't have your strategy on one page, you don't have a strategy. And so a lot of times you got to have a short game and a long game. And I think a lot of times entrepreneurs don't really have a really clear strategy. And it's even like Brendon Burchard. If you look at High Performing Habits, his book is so freaking amazing that the High Performing Habits, just the first thing is seek clarity. So I think it's like, how long did I want to stay in? How long did we want to grow this? What's the strategic exit, and how's that going to happen? You've got to think about that. You got to think about that in the beginning. And so I always work on a one-page strategy that we have that was developed by Jim Kiltz. And we actually teach companies. And I did that with my own companies. I'm doing that with my own companies now. Because if you don't have your strategy on one page, you don't have a strategy. If your secretary doesn't know what your end goal is, or your development team, or your sales and marketing team, and all of that, then you're not going to go very, very far. And so I think that's the first thing that you have to do, is ensure that you have a great strategy. and that you get all those things in place. The other thing that I think that we've done really, really well is ensuring that you have an economic engine and an economic model. A lot of companies run out of gas before they get to executing that. You know, we're growing a really fun company right now called Parachute, and it's in the circulation economy. And it's, you know, around right now we're focused on camera gear and digital tech. So a drone or, you know, a new Canon D Mark 6 or whatever it may be, you can actually get that not from Best Buy or somewhere else. You can put that into circulation. You can do gear much like, you know, Airbnb does for homes and things like that. It's phenomenal. It's growing like crazy. But I mean, it's been super, super fun. I love the trenches. I love entrepreneurship. I love solving problems. And so I think that along with being able to have a strategy and then being really good at solving problems and then putting the right people in place, I think that's been a huge piece of our success in growing businesses.
So in all these businesses, do you play the same role across all the companies, or has it changed from company to company, kind of where you sit in the company?
I think it's a lot of it's the same role. A lot of it is working on the high level strategy, and then you know, one of the things